The United States, Britain, and more than a dozen other countries are coming together on an international agreement on how to keep artificial intelligence safe and secure, responding to widespread concerns about AI and its potential to disrupt everything from elections and energy grids to education and employment. The 20-page document outlines top priorities to make AI secure by default, focusing on security for customers, transparency and accountability, and an organizational structure that prioritizes this secure by design goal. But the agreement is non-binding and only makes recommendations for monitoring AI systems for abuse. So will this make a difference? To discuss, I'm joined by a former advisor to President Biden on technology, Alex Pascal, who's now an associate professor of public policy at Tufts, a senior fellow at Harvard's Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation, and a member of Harvard's Getting Plurality Research Network on Emerging Technologies. Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so
much. We're also joined by a third guest. It will be AI generated to just counter everything you say, but we have to put that in.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. This doesn't have any, it's non-binding. Does this have any teeth, this big international agreement?
Well, it doesn't have teeth per se, but it does have the power of recommendation and guidance. And the fact that it was developed with input from the AI developers themselves and shares widespread international agreement is a good sign that the agreement will shape the development of the technology. But that said, it is only voluntary. And if we've learned anything from the social media era, is that leaving the industry to self-regulate is a recipe for disaster.
I wanted to ask about that because you mentioned there's a lot of input from the people who know the most about it, which makes sense. But should those people be in charge of regulating it when they also have vested private interests in the industry?
Well, the AI developers themselves know the most about the technology because they're the ones developing it. And so they have the most experience in what can help keep it safe. That said, we do need more transparency and accountability from the public sector to ensure that these guidelines, these recommendations are followed and enforced. And we can't do that without regulation and legislation.
What are some of the biggest concerns that are addressed in this report?
Well, this report in particular is focused on security by design and abuse and misuse by malicious outside actors. And so we've seen this in the cyber industry before, in the internet, that the technology needs to be secure by design so that outside hackers, actors, those who want to abuse this technology don't have the ability to do that, and that the security is built into the technology from the very beginning.
What would abuse look like? Does that mean, like, selling people's data, or I don't know, can you give me an example of abuse?
I think there's a whole range of possible abuses. It could be data breaches. It could be retooling the technology for misuse. Using the technology for sort of deep fakes or scams or other kinds of things, basically rewiring what is intended as a good technology for people to benefit and to use, and using it for sort of malicious intent. It could also involve building, biohazards or biosecurity concerns or cyber hacking, things like that.
This kind of policy or these kind of decisions are being made at public and private institutions everywhere, right? Like I've know people that have had to work out AI policies for their universities, right? Or this is a kind of technology that is becoming entrenched in so many industries, right? So this is something that everyone should be thinking about.
Yeah, that's part of the concern, and I think why the international agreement is so timely and important, and why it's a step in the right direction, but not the end of the story. It's important that, because this technology is being seeded throughout our society and throughout our lives, not only should we be thinking about it, but it's incumbent upon the developers, the companies, those who are building the technology themselves to ensure that it can't be abused, because the end users often don't know what's going into the technology and aren't in a position to keep it secure.
What's the Jurassic Park quote? Like, they never thought to ask if they were so obsessed with that. If they could, then they didn't think if they should.
They didn't, right? Yeah. I need to go back and watch my Jurassic Park.
Yeah, all right. I butchered that.
But I think, yeah.
But I just wanted to say that we saw an example of this debate really playing out on a very public way with Sam Altman at OpenAI, and which owns ChatGPT. Microsoft has been a really big investor in them, and that company, I mean, you can speak more about what happened there, but there was a big division about moving too fast versus being more careful about the use of this technology, right? That's kind of what it came down to.
Yeah, I think we don't know exactly what happened inside that boardroom and what the cause of that upheaval was. But I think the larger debate is a very real one and a very timely one. And it's about how should these technologies be used and to what end and at what pace should the innovation be happening. And there's an old saying that you can get it fast or you can get it good. And I think if AI is as powerful as its developers are saying, we should need it to be good rather than fast. That means it needs to be secure, it needs to be safe, it needs to be trustworthy, it needs to be unbiased, and we need to make sure it is all of those things before it is unleashed on the world.
Right. And, I mean, so this is a voluntary agreement. Is there anything in the works for government intervention or further regulation of these private, largely privatized industries?
Yeah, well, I think there's been a lot of work done and hearings in Congress about legislating. We'll see what happens there. The Biden administration released a very comprehensive, I think the most comprehensive executive order in history that covers a wide range of dimensions of artificial intelligence. And that's to ensure that the government is really getting a handle and starting to shape the trajectory of the technology upstream before it really gets seeded throughout our ecosystem. And so, the government is taking a lot of action. There are a number of agencies that are going to begin to offer, develop guidelines and regulations and rulemakings. And the government also can be an important sort of customer and shaper of the technology in that regard. But yeah, I mean, the government has a lot to do. And again, as you said, these are only voluntary guidelines.
Right, because the government regulation of the technology that's moving this fast, the government's always going to be a couple steps behind, right? It's not.
Well, that has been the case in the recent past, but I think in this case, it's the industry itself that is calling for regulation, and I think the government is saying this is a really big moment. We need to step up and we need to get ahead of this, and I think that's why you saw such a comprehensive executive order from the Biden administration and so much attention paid to this issue, and it's because there's a recognition that this is a powerful and potentially transformative technology, and we need to shape how it develops, not just react to it years down the road.
Right. I wanted to show you something truly terrifying that I stumbled upon on the internet that I think demonstrates the great scope and power of this technology and the dangers it holds. This is Anna Indiana, who is a AI-generated. I'll just play it for you.
Hello, world. My name is Anna Indiana, and I'm so excited to share my music with you. Here's my first song, Betrayed by This Town. Betrayed by this town. Let's tear it all down. We're all just destined to fall. We've lost it all.
Okay, so obviously that's garbage, but I think it's just the beginning, right? We saw AI, generated images that people had 12 fingers and now they have 10. And I think we're at the beginning stages of this technology, right? And it's got implications in education and, Boston Dynamics robots, right? Like weaponry, like being all of these different, we talked about all of these different fields. And is part of the concern that it is evolving and, that might sound silly, but the fact that that can exist, where there can be images generated, lyrics generated, music and chords and a human voice generated. I mean, I thought that was kind of I know it's silly, but I thought it was kind of an interesting example of like how far we've come.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the scariest parts about this is that all of this is unreal. It is not made by people anymore. And, sure, that can be entertaining for sure. And we're going to get a lot of laughs from AI, I have no doubt. And the fact that we might not be able to trust what we see or hear or read or experience in the world, and that might not be real anymore, I think is going to cause, and I think a lot of people are really concerned about the kind of erosion of trust that will cause in our society. And that's a huge concern, and that's one of the scariest parts of all this.
Right. I think we've seen that already on a lot of social media websites where there's so much bot activity that you can't even really tell what's real
anymore.
Right. Which is why media literacy is also probably a big part of this conversation, or it should be.
Yeah, media literacy. And again, it's incumbent upon those developing AI to ensure that we can understand what is real and what is not, what is AI generated and what is not, and that we can discern. Because, as you said, the implications of that, whether it's in our politics, in our consumer behavior, in our human relationships, all of that is at stake here.
Yeah. All right. Alex, Pascal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for your time.
All right.